Is your pet a picky eater? If your pet has been on raw since they were young, or you're just transitioning them now, odds are you had to deal with them being picky over something at one point or another, especially if you have a cat or a ferret. In this video, I'm first going to go over why your pet may be showing some apprehension with certain cuts, and then go over some ways you could solve it, so be sure to stick around until the end. Number 1, a medical issue. If your cat, dog, or ferret is being picky, of course, the first thing you want to do is rule out a medical condition that's causing it, like pain, GI upset, kidney or liver disease, Addison's disease, or cancer, especially if they're flat out not eating. Number 2, teething. If you have a puppy, kitten, or kit, their mouth may be a little sensitive during their teething stage and may have some trouble chewing. How can you solve this? Try blending it up. This is what I had to do with my dog Matsu's food for the first month or two. I could tell he wanted to chew the chunks, but he just wasn't biting down hard enough. Blending it up made it much easier. The bone would often blend pretty well because they were small, but when it didn't, I would just pulverize it. Number 3, anxiety. This can be because you're around them while they're eating, or if you're not around them while they're eating. Some dogs develop resource guarding behaviors where they don't feel comfortable with others hovering around them. Others don't feel comfortable with eating unless you're sitting with them. While the resource guarding should be worked on from an external source, one way to solve this is to feed them in a closed space where they feel safe, like their crate. Another way, which works in both scenarios, is hand feeding. This is also a great feeding practice anyways, as it creates a bond with you and your dog. Matsu isn't comfortable if I'm not sitting with him, so I often hand feed him since I'm down there anyway. With my ferret, Guts, he didn't want to eat if I was watching him, and often ate in his tunnel because it was dark like a burrow. Number 4, imprinting behavior. Cats and ferrets have a survival mechanism that develops when they're young, where they imprint on foods and are skeptical of new things. It takes a little more time when introducing new things to them, so to solve this, sometimes blending a tiny amount of new cuts or proteins and mixing it with their food may help them develop a taste for it. And then you can slowly work your way up. Additionally, mixing it with tasty liquid to encourage them might help. Some great liquid sources you could try are kefir, raw milk, bone broth, or canned fish juice. Number 5, not getting enough exercise. Some pets may not have much of an appetite if they haven't expended much energy that day. Burning calories promotes hunger, so this is one of the easiest ways to get your pet to eat something they often aren't fond of. On days when Matsu and I don't get much exercise in, he's a lot less enthusiastic about eating. On days that we hike or take long walks, he is super excited to eat. Now, onto a few other methods that might work with a picky eater if they aren't dealing with any issues I mentioned above. Number 1, feeding during a training session. Dogs are much more excited to eat when you're working them up and praising them with a treat. Treating them with what they're being picky with might trick their mind into realizing that it's something tasty and exciting. Number 2, freezing. Oftentimes, meats have a strange texture and can turn your dog off. A great remedy that I have had success in is feeding them frozen. Matsu isn't the biggest fan of thawed oily fish and shellfish, but when they're given to him frozen, he loves them. Many times, owners have trouble getting their dog to eat organ meats as well. Blending them and freezing the organ meat, portioned out in silicone molds or ice trays, and then feeding them as a popsicle just might do the trick. Number 3, feeding in a different bowl or plate. In my experience with cats and ferrets, they don't really enjoy eating out of bowls. With kibble-fed cats, I'm sure you've seen a cat or two act like the bowl was empty when they ate everything in the center, yet there's still a bunch of food around the sides of the bowl. My guess is that they don't like sticking their face in small spaces, or getting their whiskers dirty. They also don't have a long snout like dogs, so getting food out of corners might be a little more challenging. I feed my cat Tangy on a platter now, and there are never little scraps left over anymore. When feeding Guts, as much as I hated the floor getting dirty, it couldn't be helped. The entire top floor of the cage was designated to his meat because that's what he preferred. Number 4, holding the bone. During the transition, your pet may be a pro at eating muscle meat and organ, but is having a hard time figuring out how to eat raw meaty bone. Something that often helps with dogs, and could help with ferrets and cats too, is holding the bone on one side so they can gnaw on the other side. This will give them an idea on how to properly chew it, and make them realize that even though it's a little different, it's still food. Number 5, warm it up. While cooking destroys some nutrients, it might be what you have to do to bring out those aromas and juices to make it a little more appetizing at first. Even just adding some warm water or bone broth might do the trick. Lightly cooking it is okay as long as it's not raw meaty bone. Never feed cooked bone. I hope at least one of these can help your picky eater realize what you're trying to feed them is nutritious and yummy. Keep trying different things and don't get frustrated. If all else fails, maybe just try the same cut but from a different animal. It's a process of trial and error. If you want to learn more about raw meaty bones or organ meats, check these videos out.